What's up, everyone? Thank you so much for coming back for part 2 of the Untold series, where I look at the untold stories of the civil rights movement, which means that I just look at some of the most important, or at least what I think are the most important court cases, civil rights court cases in America. If you haven't already, you might want to stop and go to the first video, because there I talk about how do you actually read a court case, because it's not intuitive. And then I also talk about the Brown versus the Board of Education decision, which was in 1954. But this week, I want to go back to 1857, almost 100 years before, and deal with another important case called Dred Scott, the Dred Scott case, which is Dred Scott versus Sanford. Now, starting with the facts. The facts are a little convoluted, but I'm going to try to simplify it just enough so we can get under that 10-minute mark. Quickly, Dred Scott, he was a slave, his wife was a slave, and he lived in Missouri. And in Missouri, it's a slave state, of course, with the Missouri Compromise of 1820, where that said that Maine can come into the Union as a free state so long as Missouri stayed a slave state. So he's in Missouri, but then his master, for whatever reason, takes him to up north to the free states. And the rule was if you went to a free territory, you could be a free person then. But for whatever reason, Dred Scott and his wife, they didn't actually sue for their freedom while they were in the free territory. Rather, they sued later on. So they were in like Illinois or Wisconsin, like I said. They come back to Missouri with their master. They still don't sue. He dies. They get inherited and still sold out for labor. And then eventually they try to pay for their freedom. And the now wife, or not widow, she's like, no, I'm not taking your money. You're still gonna be my slave. Then they sue for their freedom. Now you may be thinking, why would they sue for their freedom? You know, as slaves, like you don't really, this just seemed like a lose-lose situation. But actually in Missouri during this time, it wasn't unusual for slaves to sue for their freedom in Missouri state courts. As a matter of fact, this book, Redemption Songs by, and I don't know if it's Leah or Leah VanderVelde, she actually talks about some of those cases and the stories behind that. She pieces it together through the court records about slaves that sued for their freedom during this period. So Dred Scott's case was not unique in and of itself, but what was unique is the fact that it actually went all the way to the United States Supreme Court. So he lost in the state court. He then filed it in federal court, and he lost there, and then eventually it makes its way to the United States Supreme Court. So those are the facts. The issue, it's simple. Was Dred Scott and his wife, were they slaves or not? Or no? The Supreme Court ruled, the holding there was, yes, you're slave. And the reasoning was, it was Chief Justice Taney ruled on a procedural ground, so that you can rule procedurally or substantively. Procedurally means like you didn't cross your T's and dot your I's, right? You know, I'm just simplifying it. But he said, you weren't a citizen, Dred Scott, because you were never contemplated as a citizen by the drafters of the Constitution. When they wrote the word citizen in, they never intended for a slave to be a citizen. Therefore, you cannot sue in federal court. You have zero rights. You're a piece of property, no more than a cow, Brooks' words. And that's when you get the famous quote, the black man has no rights, which the white man is bound to respect. The thing with procedural, if you're going to rule on procedural grounds, usually the court, they try to do that because it's simpler, and then they just like stop. They don't want to go any farther because they don't want to, or further, they don't want to have to get more involved in the case than they need to. But here, Chief Justice Taney just really went in, like it's a very long case, the breadth of it all, where he goes through the history of what did the drafters mean by citizen, and this is why you are not a citizen. And so the breadth of it, like I said, is just very wide ranging. And so he eventually, like I said, he ruled against Dred Scott, said, you shouldn't have brought this case, you're not a citizen. This case should have been dismissed to begin with. Now, this case is remarkable for a few reasons. One, like I said before, it went all the way up to the Supreme Court. The other cases had not. And then two is the fact, like I said, that Chief Justice Taney really went in because he thought he was going to solve this slave question once and for all. He was going to do away with it. He's going to go in and stop. Unfortunately for him, he miscalculated, and then within a few years, there was the American Civil War because of all of this, because of the issue of slavery. And then lastly, what I think is the most remarkable is that while this is not good law, no one's going into court to argue this, it was never overturned explicitly by the United States Supreme Court. Arguably, the 14th Amendment, I think most people would agree, the 14th Amendment overruled Dred Scott. But there's no Supreme Court case that comes back and says, you know that language we used in Dred Scott? My bad, we should never use that. Black people do have rights that the white man is bound to respect. And I think that's significant in how the court treats African Americans today sometimes. That's kind of the sentiment you get when you think about like police brutality cases and outcomes there. It's like, well, the black man has no rights. The black man has no rights, which anyone's bound to respect. If you want to know more about the case, just kind of like the background of Dred Scott and his wife, this is also another good book by the same author. It's called Mrs. Dred Scott, where she sort of pieces together through different historical documents their life and what it must have been like, and the story of their freedom. Dred Scott did eventually become free that same year that the Supreme Court came down with its decision in 1857, but unfortunately he died the next year. So anyway, those are some good books. I'll put them up again. It's Redemption Songs and then Mrs. Dred Scott. I also have this listed below in the comment section. I wrote a 6-part series about Black history, Black laws, Black people in the law, I think. I can't remember the name. Anyway, I did a 6-part series about Black people and the laws and the history there. And I did one particular part that dealt with Dred Scott, as well as the Stono Rebellion in South Carolina. So that link will be below as well. If you like this video, please be sure to like it. Write a comment if there's something that you want me to look up, any case that you want me to discuss and give my insight, or give whatever kind of insight I can give. Leave me a note. Please feel free to share this video, share it out wherever you want to share it. Oh, and be sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel so you never miss a video whenever I pop up with one, because I also do book reviews. I love books and I love sharing books, as you can tell in this video. Until next time, y'all be blessed.